I have no idea, Cheryl. It's a great question. Maybe I can come at it this way. I I have heard you say that your faith really sustained you. And by 2016, I had evolved through a spiritual awakening to the point where I'm aware of so much more than just my body and this life and the accumulation of things and status. And so I had already begun. I think moving to the Adirondacks was an outward manifestation of an inward transformation that my husband and I both had been making, that we weren't interested in the things anymore. We weren't interested in the big, beautiful house. We were interested in meaning and experience and richness and simplicity.
Disinformation is spreading.
There will be a
We only have
surprise
so many
outbreak
beds.
is the issue of
Isn't
pandemic.
that how I
No
thought I
social
would end
distancing
college?
at all.
They said that they would express their concerns about the mask supply.
Where's the
One
mask?
expert
Where's the
says
glove?
a second wave is
We all need some good news.
A message for all the healthcare workers out there.
Thank you.
If you're looking for hope tonight, raise your hand. If you feel alone and don't understand, if you're fighting the fight of your life, then stand.
From Santa Rosa, California, this is 19 Stories. I'm Cheryl Halling. The guest joining me today is Chritine Powers, who describes herself as an activator for business and thought leaders who are longing to know themselves deeper and step into the next level of their service on the planet. Melding 30 years of expertise in marketing, design, branding, PR, communications, and fundraising, in 2018, Chritine created the Philosophers Camp, a summer camp for leaders inspired by the 1858 Philosophers Camp led by Ralph Waldo Emerson and William Stillman. The Philosophers Camp offers fellowship, wilderness, exploration, a cross-pollination of ideas, and restoration of bodies and souls. It is located on a beautiful 100-acre rustic luxury sanctuary in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. Chritine studied theater and voice at Northwestern University and the University of Notre Dame and is a world-class soprano with a range that spans 3.5 octaves. She uses her powerful voice to create meditative and healing lullabies, such as her I Am Word, which she created after the Paris attack in the fall of 2015. She references how she learned radical detachment and the grace of inhabiting the horizon of pure potential when the entire contents of her home and business were burned to ash. She nurtured, parented, and as she says, failed 3 children that span over a decade in ages, navigating the dynamics of a blended family and maintaining a vibrant second marriage. There's obviously much to unpack in that, so let's meet Chritine Powers by extending a warm welcome to 19 Stories.
Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here. And like prior guests, I'm tearing up.
Oh, well, I'm almost crying as well because what it's taken for you and I to have this conversation. Listeners don't know, but I mean, I just want to thank you so much for joining me. We've finally able to come together as there were a few
Yeah.
obstacles, including right before our recording, in getting to this first conversation. Well, first podcast conversation, if you will. And I want to acknowledge also and say that I'm really sorry about the recent loss of your godfather,
Mm,
as you had expressed to me how very close you were to him.
yeah. Yep, that was a biggie. I have been pretty blessed thus far to still have both of my parents with me. And other than my parents, my godmother and godfather, well, this is a story you might want to dive into. My parents used to send me to their home in the summer for rehabilitation.
Oh, oh,
Oh
really?
yeah. So
Oh,
they had a very powerful influence in my upbringing in many amazing ways. And my godfather was a gentle but brilliant, complex, amazing man. And his death was really sudden. So the grief is still right there, right there.
and I hope you don't mind me acknowledging that and mentioning it because it is recent. And I know that grief, we're, I think over the past couple of years, we've heard about death so much that somehow we become desensitized to it. And I don't want to ever be that way towards somebody's loss because grief it's real and we need to process it. And
Mhm.
I'm half being facetious when I ask you, you mentioned your parents sent you to your godparents for rehabilitation. Were you rehabilitating from your relationship with your with your own parents or like that's quite the statement.
I was a difficult child. Yeah, I mean, we laugh about it, but I was the third daughter with a baby brother who came along and like ruined it all for me. But I, boy, I've been speaking my mind since I was pretty young and pretty sassy. Somewhere in a bio that you didn't get your hands on, I talk about how I was dubbed Sarah Bernhard at a very young age.
I did
Um,
see that, and I just have to interject and say, what's kind of weird now that you're telling me you're the 3rd daughter,
yeah.
I'm the 3rd daughter, and my dad used to say that about me and play his little violin because he
Oh,
said I
that's
was so dramatic.
right,
This
right,
this is
right.
a kinship here already,
Yeah,
Chritine.
everything was tears, or just everything was big, but I've always been big. So, and I think my mom was worn out, I think she was worn out. And so they would send me off, pack me up, and I'd go to Rochester, New York from Albany. And it was amazing because my godparents had no children and they had a pool. They,
Mm,
um, let's put it this way, they taught me how to play chess, how to play bridge. My godmother taught me macrame, tennis, beading, crocheting, knitting,
wow.
puzzles, arts and crafts. So I got this like amazing attention all summer, which was very, very nurturing. And I am firmly, profoundly loved by my parents. But this was a very different place for me to be. And I really felt like the queen of a castle. And my godmother and godfather were very strict with me, which was also very helpful because it modeled that you're not bad, you're not being punished, you can be disciplined and still be loved.
That is so beautiful. And you know what? It's actually very proactive of your parents to realize that not only did you need, I mean, it was healthy choice for both of them and for you to
Mhm.
go and have this experience. I mean, how many children actually get to learn the things that you talked about? And you mentioned pool. So I'm going to use this as a
Mhm.
segue because it's hard to believe that you and I first met 5
At a
months
pool.
ago by the pool at She Podcast Live conference in Arizona, as
Correct.
it seems like a whole other dimension ago and time frame, already, only 5 months ago, but wow, here we are in the middle of February
Yeah.
2022. So before we get into all the wonderful things that you've been up to and that you are doing with your life, I'd love if you could share a couple of takeaways that you have from the conference.
Mm. The first thing was the joy, I mean, the absolute joy of being together in community again.
Yes, yeah.
I got my Pfizer booster shot 4 days before I got on the plane to Arizona, and I felt bulletproof. So, I was just so comfortable and flitting around and socializing, but there was a palpable joyousness among everyone, all these fantastic, mostly women, a couple men here and there, but mostly women just, so content and happy to be together. So it had, I thought, an extra energy, an extra buoyancy, and that made it very special. The other thing I took away from it is that I would not want to be tied to a full-time podcast. I, I gained immense respect for anyone who pioneers such a communication vehicle. But I did commit in the second half of 2022 to doing a limited series podcast. So I was there for a different purpose. I'm actually not a podcaster. I was there to present at a pre-mastermind. So I had the great, I guess, freedom of just kind of wandering around without any agenda to just be myself and meet people and soak it all in. And I found the community, also the third takeaway is I found the community to be incredibly authentic,
Mhm.
refreshing, and real. And I gravitate toward that.
Well, how beautiful that you got clarity that a full-time podcast is not something you want to do because it is a commitment. It really is. And unless you're monetizing, it's a labor of love for so many people. And it does take energy and time and getting that kind of clarity. And, my follow-up question was going to be, what is your podcast going to be about and when can we look forward to it? But you answered that. Good for you in getting that clarity.
Yeah, absolutely. I do frequent meditations. I have a good voice for it. I have good Shakti. I don't know if people know that word. It means intelligent energy that knows where to go and does a particular job. And I will spend 5 to 6 hours editing a 10-minute meditation. And, so I know myself that I'm capable of doing the creative, but it would probably suck me under. And I don't want that commitment. I have a couple of ideas. The world could be radically different yet again by the fall, but
Mhm.
the few themes that are really passionate for me continue to be my Philosophers Camp and this return to nature as a necessity, not a luxury for anyone who does any kind of leadership, thought leadership, business leadership. And also, I'm writing my first book, which I don't want to say too much about, but it's a manifesto and a love letter to my Gen X sisters.
Mm, that's beautiful. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, just even you telling me the concept of it says a lot in and of itself.
Yeah, it's a manifesto. It's a call to arms. It's going to be bold and in essence, in my travels, including She Podcast, in my travels, I'm seeing more and more women who near about, late 40s to late 50s who nearly have it all
Yeah.
and they're nearly dead. And I have a lot, yeah, I have a lot to say about that. I work with, leaders, CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs in kind of the spiritual consigliere, right? I'm an ordained minister. I also am a death doula, kind of circling back to the beginning of the conversation. And so I'm very comfortable shepherding people through transcendence of themselves and through grief, which comes in all kinds of forms. So I have a lot to say, a lot to give. And to me, my Gen X sisters, this generation, there's whew, a lot of healing and wholeness to come to so that we can actually begin the real work of our contributions and legacy once we shed the kind of the BS that we were told when we were young.
And in some ways are still told.
Correct.
It all depends on where our focus is at. And I did not find in my research that you were an ordained minister. So I thank you for bringing that to light. And I did read, though, and I was going to ask you about that, but since you brought it up, what is a death doula? I think the name says what it is, but can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yes. A death doula is a person who puts themselves in a place of service for a family or an actual person who is beginning the transition to leave this incarnation, this lifetime. It can be active, like a chaplain in a hospital, sitting bedside at hospice, providing respite for caregivers. It can be very hands-on. It can also be planning oriented. It can be leaving a legacy. How's your estate? Do you want to do a memory book? What's important to you? So it's a person who comes in with zero judgment, zero agenda. It's non-denominational. Sometimes there's no spirit at all, but in my experience, people who are getting ready to end their life can't help but fall into that place where their soul begins to want to work it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so a death doula just, is that capacity of love and support in a variety of different ways.
What a beautiful service that is to provide for someone and or a family, because having been a caregiver to both of my parents as they transitioned less than 3 months apart, to come alongside not only the person who's transitioning out of this world, but the family who is so overwhelmed with what is going on that sometimes there's a lot of things that fall through the crack. And you and I, before we started recording, talked about drama, and there's so much drama, as I'm sure you've probably experienced in
Mhm.
being with families as someone is dying. So thank you for explaining that a little bit more. And Chritine, when you and I first met, we had this really brief but lovely conversation about the Philosophers Camp, which we're going to definitely speak more about. But I want to talk to you about what you shared with me and also some of what's on your website. You've experienced serious illness twice. You lost your home and your business in a fire. And any one of those catastrophic events is enough to paralyze a lot of people. And so I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing what your business was at the time and walking us through how all of the aforementioned events unfolded for you.
In 2016, at that time, I was the principal in a boutique communications firm that had an emphasis on working for clients who were committed to uplifting humanity. That's the kind of underlying theme of everything and everybody I hang out with and what I do and what I'm here for. And we lived in a beautiful home in a suburb of Albany, the capital of New York State. And in 2014, my husband, who's really different from me. So, just to kind of give you some silos, you all know that I'm a graduate of Notre Dame. I'm the daughter of an attorney. You can hear from my rehabilitation camps that, I had a pretty cushiony, pretty blessed upbringing. My husband, on the other hand, left home at age 13 and had to make his way in the world at 13. And he's a wilderness guide. He's an outdoor kind of guy. And so what we realized, two things. In 2014, he bought this little tiny falling down shack off the tax rolls in the Adirondack Mountains because he had to go to the mountains. And I realized watching him that he was dying. He was dying in the suburbs. He didn't belong there. And then I looked at myself and I thought, oh my God, I'm dying too. Like, metaphorically and energetically, but it led me to this one of my sayings is that comfort is a soft killer, right? So we made this, I think, courageous decision to move to the Adirondack Mountains to sell our big home. We were acquiring the 100 acres around this tiny, tiny cabin. And we didn't have the money to have both. A lot of people have both. They have their city home, their country home. We couldn't do that.
Well, a lot of people in certain circles. Let's clarify that.
Yeah. So no matter how modest. So we went from a home that was 3,000 square feet to one that was, and I'm not kidding when I say this, 500 square feet.
I get it.
For three of us. Yeah. But we had 100 acres and we had a lot of promise and everything went incredibly smooth. My husband is also a contractor. So we did a big spruce up to our big home, put it on the market. We had 4 offers in 4 days. Life was fabulous. We had a cash deal. We closed the deal on June 10th. We were going to head north on June 25th. And right around that time, yeah, it's pretty hard. I actually happened to have the flu. Pretty ironic. I had 102 fever. I was very sick and we were staying at a friend's. Our house sold. We had to get out because it was a cash deal. It went really fast. So we moved everything we owned into my husband's construction warehouse. My business, my computers, my backups to my computers, right? Because we were moving.
Oh, wow.
Treasures, my husband's business, every single thing we owned, we said, we're going to put it in the warehouse and we're going to sort it. We're going to, figure out what we're doing next. We were flying high. We were flush with cash, like we sold our house. Life was good. No, we got a call 8:00 at night. And I will never forget these words. I heard my husband say, "What do you mean my building's on fire?" And we turned on the local cable news channel and we were affronted with this historic 8-alarm, smoke in the air, 50 miles in all directions, because the warehouse was also inhabited by a roofing company with all kinds of dangerous chemicals in the middle of a neighborhood in the city of Waterville. And the whole thing, this building was the size of 2 football fields. It used to be an old shipbuilding company, so lots of wood was on fire. And so we watched our lives burn on TV. And that was pretty it was pretty amazing. I would say I was, very panicked. I was shaking for several hours. But 5:00 in the morning, Larry came back with the truck And as soon as he got out of the truck, I had dressed myself in, it was June, it was summer solstice, so it was bright at 5 o'clock in the morning in upstate New York. And I said, I'm going down. He said, no, you're not. I said, I'm going down. So I took our truck and I drove to the tape 3 blocks. They had evacuated 3 blocks. And I know this is like nothing compared to the wildfires in California, but this was a thing. And it was dangerous because there were so many chemicals and it was such a hot fire. And there were 2 fire companies there still trying to put it out. And I went up to the tape and I got down on my knees and I wailed with like every ounce I had. I wailed and I screamed, and I call it my wailing wall of Jerusalem moment. And then honestly, Cheryl, I didn't cry about it for 2 years. I got up, I dusted off my knees, and I just pulled myself together. And then I entered a state of grace. I was really held by grace because it wasn't long after that where I began to see in the field of my consciousness that we had actually been given a blank slate to create. And that because life had broken all the rules, I no longer felt obligated to play by them. And so it was a delicious time of emptiness, possibility. And I wanted to stay there. And I did. I stayed there. I was very conscious about every choice that I made to bring something back into my life or to replace something, or even what I was going to do for a living, who I was going to be. And you can draw a pretty strong line from that to Philosophers Camp, a year and a half later. Pretty strong line.
I definitely want to talk about it, and I can see how that drove you, especially after you just the way you explained it, really gave you the desire and impetus and direction to move towards the Philosopher's Camp. And I want to say, Christine, I've heard that because we do have so many fires here. And my husband,
Mm.
it's his second marriage, my first, but he lost a home in a fire. And as much as he once in a while he'll grieve certain things that, oh, I wish I could show you this. Or he had $20,000 worth of musical equipment and he's a musician. So, it immediately hit where his expression of creativity is. But I have heard people who have survived fires before say that grace, it's kind of unexplainable. And yet I would like, and maybe there's no concrete answer to this, but the moment you got up and you brushed yourself off, that is a resolve that is almost supernatural. Where did you pull from to have that happen for you?
I have no idea. I have no idea, Cheryl. It's a great question. Maybe I can come at it this way. I I have heard you say that your faith really sustains you.
Mhm.
And by 2016, I had evolved through a spiritual awakening to the point where I'm aware of so much more than just my body and this life and the accumulation of things and status. And so I had already begun. I think moving to the Adirondacks was an outward manifestation of an inward transformation that my husband and I both had been making, that we weren't interested in the things anymore. We weren't interested in the big beautiful house. We were interested in meaning and experience and richness and simplicity. And by making that move, we had cut down our expenses. Our expenses were going to be cut by 75%.
Oh, beautiful.
So we were ready to kind of go and play. So in a way, I realized that I had been freed. I'd actually been freed. And there definitely was grief. And I moved through, all the stages. You can't short circuit them. And I moved through them in my own pace and my own time. But I have often said the fire was easy compared to other things that could have befallen our family. I think it was easy, and I think it was a gift because I walk much lighter on the planet.
Yeah, because you're not encumbered by And I guess I'm taking your lead on this, the trappings of a big, beautiful home and all the responsibility that goes with that. And yet you've created another beautiful space for yourself. And
Mm.
I would love to talk about the Philosophers Camp. I think it's a good time to do that. And I did want to ask you though, on your website, you mentioned and you show this beautiful fireweed, which is the first blossom after a fire. And then you mentioned dragon song and fireweed. What is your dragon song?
I am a huge operatic soprano, so I am dragon song.
Okay.
It's I'm a lyric spinto soprano. A lyric means that you have a voice big enough to sing over an orchestra without amplification. Think Leontine Price, Carrie Takanawa, big voices. And spinto means I have shimmer at the top. So I have always been bordering on being a dramatic soprano, which is kind of the heaviest soprano, think, Valkyries. But really, I'm a Puccini specialist. But I can also move with Mozart, right? So I have this huge voice. And I started being on stage when I was 7. So what I've come to understand about myself, actually, it really came home when I sang in Warsaw in 2005, that I have a voice that awakens hearts and it activates and it opens energies. And so I am Dragon Song because it's huge and it's powerful. And when I sing, I have a lookout on my property where we have about 70, 80, 90
Ugh.
mile views with about 10 layers of mountains. And I sing from there. I mean, I just sing down into the valley. I don't know how my neighbors feel about it, but we have 12 people per square mile, so there's not too many neighbors. But I sing and I visualize it literally going around the earth and coming back to me. And that is a hallmark of my singing. I send it out and I send it soaring like a dragon might fly through the sky.
I love that vision of you singing, and I'm curious if you've attracted any animals to your porch in doing so, because animals are really soothe the savage beast, but they're also attracted to music.
Mhm.
So have you encountered any wildlife in the midst of your singing?
No. I I haven't, but we have. It's an interesting question. Not that I'm aware of. What comes to mind though is I have a little enlightenment hut at the same lookout that my husband built for me as my meditation place. It's off the grid. It's 8 by 12, and it has these fantastic views. And sometimes I send my students up there for a solo overnight, but often I will stay up there. I've stayed up there for 17 days. That's the longest time.
17
Coming
solo?
down for a
Really?
shower.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So people don't have to worry, I do come down and shower and and
When you're
replenish my food
solo,
and
it
fill up.
doesn't really matter, Christine.
But one morning I was out pre-dawn and I needed to relieve myself, right? So I'm in a vulnerable position. I'm relieving myself. And I heard this snort and I thought it was a bear and I jumped like out of my skin and I screamed and then it screamed, right? And there was all this screaming going on. And I ran back inside, my heart thumping away. And I was furious with my dog because he was with me and he didn't alert me to any presence, which he usually does. And so as soon as I could, I got on the internet and I texted my husband down the mountain, a quarter of a mile away. And I said, I heard this noise. It turned out that it was a deer. I had no idea the deer could make a
I
noise like
didn't know
that.
that either.
Yeah, it almost sounded like a cross between a honk and an elephant. It was hideous. It was hideous. It was
I don't think you
terrifying.
had any I don't think you had to be concerned about elephants,
No,
Christine.
it was, but it was hideous. It was a hideous sound, right? So no, I've had no encounters while singing.
But that story is wonderful. Christine, I cannot believe it. And again, for our audience, this is the only the second conversation, or real fleshed out conversation, if you will, since we've met 5 months ago. And I had a similar experience when I was with Outward Bound. I do not know what's going on with my throat, so I apologize.
It's your throat chakra. Yeah, it's your throat chakra. Sorry.
Excuse me. No, that's okay. where I took a trip with Outward Bound and we do a solo overnight, similar to what you just explained that you do with your do you call them your students or the people who
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Victims.
Okay.
No, clients, students, it depends. I think clients is a good word. I never know what to call them because I walk side by side with
Right.
them, right? So I don't really know what to call them.
Well, they
Yeah.
probably leave as friends, but all to say is I did have an encounter with a bear while I was marking my territory on my solo because I didn't want any animals coming past my
Yeah,
yeah, so the things you learn in the wild,
that's
right?
right. Yes, yes, there's reasons we go mark our territory.
I've told that story to people and they're like, "You did what?"
Oh yeah, no, this is a very important thing. Yeah. This is going to be funny. We have a luxury glamp site. This was our solution, by the way, going back to the fire. We had nowhere to live. And we knew we weren't going to have anywhere to live, but we were looking at Airbnbs for the summer. And I'm like, I'm not paying that. I don't have that. And by the way, we were not properly insured. So all that money we left with was phew, gone.
No.
So it
No.
was a
Oh.
wipeout of biblical proportions, but we ended up creating this luxury kind of glam site where we lived for 3 months. I lived with my son and my husband outside, and he would work on our cabin down the road. And we got this lotus bell shaped tent from New Zealand. And because we lived there, it became super, super, super comfortable. And I had an outdoor kitchen, and we just kept adding things. We kept adding things, and we added a bathroom with a flushing toilet that went all the way down the hill into the septic because my husband is a genius. He's the MacGyver of construction. So we were really well cared for. And so we ended up turning it into a glamping compound in 2017. And we're a 5-star luxury glam site, and we have been ever since. But whenever we have people come for a picnic or guests or whatever, like we just run around and tell the men, like, okay, don't use the bathroom, go out in the woods. Don't use the bathroom, circle the perimeter and just keep doing your thing. And they're like, what? Like, no, seriously, you're helping everybody out. But yes, sprinkling the perimeter is an excellent idea because we are deep in the mountains.
And people who camp or spend any time out in the wilderness understand what that means. Excuse me, I really don't
Yes.
know what this is never we're having a lot of firsts today, Christine. This is really good. It's all uphill from here. So, gosh, you spoke so your glamp site, in addition to the Philosophers Camp, it's a freestanding business, is that right?
Philosophers Camp is the name of a program. So it's not the name of the land. The land is actually we're launching this spring is ASA Adirondack. And we're not a retreat center, we're not a wellness resort, we're not a hotel. It's a whole new concept. We are an ASA. And ASA means sanctuary and refuge in
Mm.
Latin. So we have what we have right now is we have the old homestead that was built in 1870, so it just turned 150. We
Wow.
gutted it to the studs. We kept the stairs, and we rebuilt everything, and that we unveiled in 2019. So that's a year-round rental, and it's also accommodations for our retreats. And then we have the luxury glam site, which sleeps six. And then we have glamping setups that we set up when we have a philosopher's camp. So this is what I mean when we talk about like sanctuary with little luxuries. When you come to Philosopher's Camp, we are going to run you through the woods where we want you to, stretch and skin your knee and get a few bug bites and, the metaphor of the woods is the teacher. The teacher is the
Yeah.
woods, and I just am clever enough to make the connection. That's all I do. And we stretch people, but we don't break them so that they go into survival mode. So everyone gets a great hot shower. We bring in these amazing gourmet cooked meals. Everyone, if you're in a glamping tent, you have a real bed with luxury linens, a lamp, a table, a bouquet of flowers, a
Oh my
rug,
gosh.
a charging,
Oh my
like everything you could want, a heater. And if you like a special kind of Japanese twig tea from Japan, by God, we're going to get that tea for you.
I was just gonna ask you that. What about my Japanese twig tea?
Funny you should mention that. So we go out of our way to, we have a big personal care team, like for for 12 participants, we have 6 on the team, right? So it's
Oh,
a really carefully curated, super thoughtful experience. And so, we have these glamping hubs that we set up. And this summer, we're also going to have a new tiny home that my husband built during COVID. It was one of his COVID projects. And then that's going to be, we're launching to the world as a sanctuary, as a place to come and deeply rejuvenate body, soul, and psyche. And we're also building a labyrinth this year, so we can become a
beautiful.
destination. Yeah, yeah.
So you are in, but you have your camps now. You're
They did not happen in 2020 and 2021. 2020 was COVID, and 2021, Miss Chritine was too sick. So we didn't have them. So we have 2 planned for this September, and we are super excited.
It sounds like just paradise. It sounds everything you described. I mean, we have similar inlets up here in Sonoma County where people on the Russian River can do glamping and what have you, but your experience sounds completely immersive into the forest where, as you say, that is the teacher.
Absolutely.
It's amazing when you go hiking or backpacking or really get away from our own noise, not just the city noise, the things that come up. So I'm curious, have you ever had an experience where things have come up for someone that you weren't equipped to help guide them through or out of?
Let me scan. No. Mm-mm. No. And I say that I'll knock on a piece of wood,
Okay.
No, I first of all, it's application only. And so not everyone is suited for it. And we're also very, gentle. I'm not a licensed psychologist. I'm not a mental health counselor. And there's places that, we don't there's no attempt to deconstruct anybody, you know. It's rejuvenation,
Good. Okay.
it's deepening, your awareness of who you are. It is peeling off the layers. Think about it this way. It's a place for those who are always giving transformation to come get their own.
To be refilled, to replenish their well.
Yeah, to be refilled. I mean, and we can only give to the world from the place that we inhabit energetically, meaning as wide and as deep as we go energetically. So it's a place to go deeper metaphorically into the roots of who you are and become more unshakable.
Mm.
As like I love the phrase pillar of light for the planet. So we are pretty blessed with pretty extraordinary people who what they have in common is they also are also committed to the upliftment of humanity, and they're also committed to their own transformation. So it's not for beginners, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. No, it definitely does.
Yeah.
Can you explain the tiers or what would be available to someone attending the camp?
Yeah. So what happens is what's available is a first of all, you unplug from the world. We take your cell phone.
Ooh,
Yeah. If your family or your business or your office needs to reach you, they get a landline and they call me and I decide if I'm going to give you the message.
really? What power? That's inherent in who you are, my dear Christine Powers. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and if it's essential, it'll go through, but if it's, but there's something magical and almost impossible now to unplug at that level. And believe me, we have very intelligent people who have all kinds of clever ways of, and in truth, somebody could, break that covenant, but they're breaking a covenant and an opportunity for themselves, right? So nobody has yet. And we've graduated almost 30 people in the first 18 months that we had this thing. So you get the opportunity to unplug fully and completely. And there's a variety of reactions to that. But in the end, they're all really positive, and everyone is beyond grateful that that happened, because what that leads to is I describe it this way. We're going to lead you into the woods along a path. We're going to get you to a certain point, and then we're going to leave you there. And there's going to be 3 or 4 paths in front of you, and then you decide where you're going next.
That sounds phenomenal. It sounds terrifying in some ways, really.
Mhm. Yeah.
let's just talk about being out in the elements. If you're not used to that, and if you've never really had an extended time doing that, that can be just fearful. Like you say, is that a elephant, or is that a bear, or a combination
Well,
of
I'll give you
both?
so I'm gonna sound like a really bad headmistress, but I'll give you an example of like you get what you need, right?
Yeah.
That one of our first participants, like the very first group that agreed to pioneer this with me, I will always be grateful to. And they're our founding philosophers. So this beautiful colleague of mine from London said, "I want to come," and I'm like, "Fantabulous," she said. In the next sentence to me, "Well, but I need brick and mortar because some of our accommodations are, in a tiny house or a guest suite." And the moment she said, "I need brick and mortar," I'm thinking, "Oh my God, you are so
The
getting a tent
opposite.
and the furthest tent. Right? I'm gonna put you in the worst tent, you know?" So, she's like, "I don't like the little things, I don't like the little things." And then by the end of the camp, she's telling everyone at the camp in our final campfire council, which is, sacred conversation, how she's in relationship with this spider that had been weaving a web the whole time. And I'm just sitting there going, "See, like my work is
Done.
done and I did
That's it.
nothing."
Charlotte came to the rescue.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing that it sounds so simple, and it is, but there's a profoundness. I mean, we don't have light pollution here, so we stumble out at 2 or 3 in the morning, and we look at
Mm.
the Milky Way
Oh my
on
gosh.
blanket,
Oh my gosh.
right? We do crystal, bowl sound baths. We do hikes. We do ceremony. We build. So there's a tool. In fact, it's going to be in my book. It's called the Philosopher's Compass. It's an inner positioning system. Think about global GPS. This is an inner positioning system. And so it's an entire pathway to mastery with 12 essential qualities, one of which, my friend, happens to be making friends with death. So we build a compass. We actually build a compass together, and it's fantastic. So it's a really unique, yes, absolutely immersive experience. And we have a beautiful, pristine lake about 15 minutes away. And usually on the last afternoon, we'll go, canoeing and kayaking, and we'll swim the lake and
Oh, wow.
picnic. And yeah, it's pretty off the hook. And I can't wait to bring it back this year because it's I think one of my greatest honor and privileges to be able to share what we have here with everybody. And honestly, that's the only reason I'm here. It would be hard for me to be here if I wasn't in community.
Thank you so much for the tip, because I'm not gonna say if, I'm gonna say when, because I am so there. I'm already there. In my mind, you've just laid out this just beautiful, beautiful experience. But I appreciate the tip. So if I say I want to sleep outside under the stars in a sleeping bag, in fact, forget the sleeping bag.
I don't even need
I
a
don't
tent.
even need a tent. I'm gonna get the cushy, comfy, plush brick and mortar. So thank you for that. I
Yes, yes,
appreciate that.
yes. Well, we do. We do have some pretty cushy accommodations too. Oh my goodness. Yeah, just tell me you want the Vision Quest with nothing but the bottle of water, the lighter, and the tarp.
No,
You're
because now we've had this conversation and you're gonna know better. But so, Christine, given the coaching and healing work you do, and you come from a really beautiful place of wanting to give and heal and be of service, who and what do you turn to for your own healing work?
Mm, you got me on that one. That's a great question. Yeah, I sing.
Mm, yeah.
I sing. I have a few, very trusted colleagues who have transcended that to become, very close friends. And we all need somebody to hold us when we're transcending ourselves, when we're going through difficulties, which we will. It's not that life is easy. It's just how we respond to all those, gifts in really bizarre wrapping paper.
Mm.
I love to read. I love John O'Donohue. In fact, I have a vision to take Philosophers Camp internationally to Ireland, to the Burren in Southwest Ireland, where I actually did a workshop a few years ago during the solstice, I want to bring a Philosophers Camp there. I find John O'Donohue's work to be mesmerizing and full of soul. I do a lot of spiritual reading, and I tried to read the Transcendentalists, which is really ironic. But they're doesn't really hold up in many ways for me.
Isn't that interesting? Well, sometimes the things that we think would be the most fulfilling and rewarding, we realize that maybe we're already at that place. And the things that it's
Yeah.
offering, either we're already in simpatico with that, or maybe we've even, no pun intended, transcended that particular place and
Mhm.
time.
Mhm. Yeah. The other thing I do for my own healing is I travel. I
Mm.
travel.
It really is one of the best educators and healers, I think.
Well, it is. We have to remember that we're part of this global ecosystem. And when I go to other places, I love to put my feet in the sand, and I don't do the touristy things. I do what the locals do. And I really like that because it just reminds me we're really all one. There really isn't much that separates us except all this artificialness, which kind of goes all the way back to why Larry and I sold our house, right? And embarked on this journey. So when I travel, it brings meaning to me, and I just love to get out there in the world.
In your travels, is there anything that you've come up against in regards to fear, or maybe fear that you hold for our world at this point?
Hmm. I have to say I'm forever changed by my trip to India. And I went to Varanasi, India, which is a very challenging city. That profoundly altered me. And I was really had to trust our guides on that trip to keep us, safe and to understand. And it was so profound, and the energy, I've never experienced anything like it. There were so many people, millions and millions of people. It was like schools of teeming fish, and it blew my mind because I was in heaven and I was in hell at the same time. And on the backside of India was how I contracted E. coli ESBL, which could have killed me.
Oh, yeah.
So let me share this in closing. When we look, this will date our broadcast, but when we look at Ukraine and Russia right now, I had the gift of singing, as I mentioned, in Warsaw in 2005.
Which I'm glad you're gonna talk about, because I really wanted to ask you about that, and we transitioned into something else, so please do share that.
Yeah. So I was on concert tour with a professional ensemble of singers from Albany, New York, and we had the opportunity to sing at the Holocaust Institute.
Mhm,
And I took on Bernstein's Kaddish, which is the song for the dead. And it
mhm.
was the most difficult piece of music I've ever tackled. And even the day of, going back to Sarah Bernhardt, I said to the director of our group, I said, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I can't hit the notes. I can't hold it. I'll never do it when I'm nervous. It's not going to happen. And she just looked at me and she said, "You're a professional," and walked out of the room. I was like, "Oh, okay,
Okay, that was
okay."
comforting,
So I,
yes.
I cried a little more, and I brushed off my knees. I said, "Okay, all right. So drama's not going to get you anywhere." So, so that night, I honestly, I just, again, I can't tell you what happened to me, but I realized there was no way out. She gave me no out, and I was not going to not sing that particular piece of music, which was about the Holocaust for Holocaust survivors who were in the audience. And
Wow.
so I didn't know it at the time because I was very inexperienced, but they snapped their fingers when I was done for about 7 minutes. Like, I'm not kidding you.
As opposed to applauding, they snap their
Yeah.
fingers?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and it turned out to be quite the thing. And I never sang like that, and I it wasn't technically perfect, but I transcended myself, and what I learned was that it was their version of, like, a standing ovation. Like, it was beyond bravado, it was beyond. And I was approached by many survivors and people, and there was, most didn't speak English, and there was no barrier between us. So we're just hugs and tears and
Mm.
thank yous. And I realized that I always knew my voice could awaken hearts because people cry when I sing, and they always have, even when I was a little girl. But this was different. This was different. And I had a healing experience, brought myself to a place of a wholeness, right? And just by overcoming my own ego, my own fear, my own fear of failure, not being good enough, and just giving everything I had with no way out. It was magic, and it was healing, and to this day, that's the most satisfying, meaningful offering I've ever made in a concert.
It sounds absolutely beautiful. And I think when you're looking out for other people and you have to rise to an occasion, it does give you a transcendental experience where it is beyond something that you would do in your own strength. And you didn't have an out. And the people who heard you sing obviously needed to hear that. That was healing for them as well. And I can only imagine what a powerful experience it was for everyone. And with that in mind, I'd love to ask you what makes you hopeful?
Well, my favorite saying, we do a little exercise at Philosophers Camp. I'm giving it away, but everyone we get down to the brass tacks of it all. And mine always has been and always will be, in the end, all there is love.
Amen. To that which I will say amen.
Amen.
Absolutely. And before we say goodbye, I would love to know, as a singer, as a world traveler, as an artist, because your Philosopher's Camp is an expression of a lot of creativity and the fact that you sing every day. If there was a soundtrack to your life, Chritine, what would be on it and why?
Oh, hi. So I'm scanning all these things. Okay, so we have Out of Africa, we have Hotel California, we have Queen, we have Chris Bodie, we have Andrea Bocelli. Like, you have no idea the Pandora's box you just opened. So I'll just say that, yeah, music drives me, and the soundtrack would be full of diversity. It would be full of magnificent contemplative pieces and really hilarious over the top pieces like Bohemian Rhapsody, right? The genius in that, Beach Boys. I have 3,000 songs on my iTunes, so, but I think in what frees me the most is when I sing a really powerful aria. So probably VC Darte from Tosca.
I can't even believe you said that. You have no idea what a blessing you've been today, Christine. That was one of my mom's favorite songs
Yeah,
to sing.
it's
And you mentioned Leontine Price, which was one of her favorite singers.
me too. She's my model, and my voice is most like hers. Yeah. Yes.
What a blessing. What an absolute blessing, Christine. Thank you so much. Please tell people how they can either get a hold of you personally to touch base with you and find out about your music and your work with the Philosophers Camp, all the things.
All the things. The great place to start is christinepowers.com, or find me on LinkedIn.
Well, that was easy. That was easy.
That's easy.
Well, you know what? Cable be damned. All the other things that have gotten in the way of us getting together for this conversation, because when I had to write you and say, I have lost my internet right before you and I were to talk, I just was like, we're going to push through this. We are going to push through this. And I'm so glad that we did.
Oh, I laughed. I thought it was great.
I'm
And
glad you
and
laughed.
how's your throat, Chakra? How's your throat?
It's the weirdest thing. I think I swallowed some water the wrong way, and it just I could not stop coughing. So I apologize to you and to the listeners, but that's what happens. And
I have a prescription for that.
okay,
Come sing from the top of my mountain.
would love to sing from your mountaintop. I look forward to the time that you and I can be in person together again, and to come visit you in your sanctuary, because that is something that is going to be now a bucket list for me of something to do. And I'm feeling called to, not just
Mm.
for the fact that I'm going to get the beautiful plushy cushy
You're gonna get the best digs?
Yes, exactly, with the French press coffee in the morning and what have you.
This is funny. The push for 2021 is for everyone to have a French press in their tent.
Well, you mean for 2022.
Oh, yeah, 2022, yeah. See what COVID does to us? We've just
That's
lost
okay, we don't
years.
even know. That
Well,
that's
Cheryl, I wanna
it.
thank you for your generosity, in this conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it, and you're a very, very generous host, and I love your show.
Thank you so much. That fills me. It really does. I will receive that because, as you touched upon, podcasting is a labor of love, and it's people like you who feed me and keep me going to hear these stories, to share these conversations, because I do hear back from listeners who say, "I listened to your conversation with Chritine Powers today, and I got to tell you how it filled my soul." So I believe that the work you're doing, the words you spoke are going to, go out from here and touch the people that need to hear it, and maybe even, have some visitors with you at the
Mm,
Philosophers Camp. So thank you for saying
mm.
that. Thank you for your time. And I think it's kismet that we met by the pool, and we are going to meet again, my dear. I know it's going to happen.
Amen.
Amen. And so you take care of yourself. Have a beautiful rest of your February. And I look forward to really good things and hearing your podcast as it launches towards the end of the year, and certainly updates about the Philosophers Camp and all the good things that are emanating from the East Coast and Chritine Powers.
Mm. In the meantime, you hold down the West Coast.
I will do that. Thank you, my dear.
My pleasure.
I'd also like to thank the following news outlets for the use of their clips in so aptly painting the picture of the fear that we're facing during this pandemic: BBC, PBS, Now This, UNESCO, and Some Good News. I especially want to thank Joel and Luke Smallbone, otherwise known as the Group for King and Country, for allowing me to use an excerpt of their song Together, which could not be a more hopeful and inspiring song for such a time as this. Finally, I'll leave you with the following from Proverbs 23:18. Surely there is a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Thank you again for joining me today. Feel free to offer feedback or a story idea at 19stories@soundsatchelstudios.com, via Instagram at CherylHollingVO. I look forward to sharing more stories on the next episode of 19 Stories from Fear to Hope. Until then, stay healthy and hopeful.
Together with our differences, together we are bolder, braver, stronger.